It was a quiet morning in the small town where she lived. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow over the streets when she opened the doors of her tiny garage. Her hands were already covered in oil and grease, and the smell of engine oil filled the air. For her, mornings like this were normal. She loved working on machines, figuring out what made them tick, and fixing what others thought was impossible. She wasn't rich, but she had something money could not buy: skill, determination, and a heart that cared for others. She wiped her hands on an old cloth, looking at the cars lined up outside. Most of them belonged to locals, regular people who trusted her more than any big garage in the city. She had built her reputation slowly, bit by bit, through honesty and hard work. She never asked for more than she deserved, and even when she earned little, she felt proud of what she could achieve. That morning, however, was different. A sleek black car rolled into the driveway, shining under the early sun. It was not like the others she was used to. This one was expensive, its engine humming quietly even when idle. The driver stepped out, a man dressed in an elegant suit that looked far too fancy for the little town. He had an air of confidence, almost arrogance, that made people notice him immediately. But despite his polished exterior, he seemed tired, weighed down by something invisible. She walked toward the car cautiously, wiping her hands again on the cloth. "Good morning, how can I help you?" she asked. The man smiled faintly, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I think my car has a problem. Can you take a look?" he said, his voice polite but carrying a hint of uncertainty. He had the look of someone who was used to giving orders, not asking for help. She nodded, her curiosity piqued. She had never seen this car before, and the way it was parked suggested he didn't want anyone else to touch it. "Of course. Bring it inside, and I'll check it out," she said, motioning toward the garage. As she worked on the car, she noticed small details that revealed the driver's carelessness. Tiny scratches on the paint, a few dents in the bumper, a smell of burnt oil that suggested someone had ignored warnings for a long time. She shook her head slightly. People like him, with everything they had, often forgot the simple things. They rushed through life, leaving problems unattended until they became too big to ignore. The man leaned against the wall, watching her work. At first, he didn't say much. He wasn't used to being in a place like this, among oil-stained rags, open tools, and the smell of gasoline. But as she worked, he started to notice something unexpected. She wasn't just fixing the car, was handling it with care, talking to it almost as if it were alive. Her fingers moved confidently over the engine, finding the exact spots that needed attention. Her eyes were focused but gentle, a rare combination that made even him feel calm. Minutes passed, then hours. She didn't rush, and neither did he. The garage seemed to shrink around them, becoming a space where only the car, the mechanic, and the man existed. He found himself asking questions, small things at first, about the engine, the parts, and how long she had been working on cars. She answered patiently, explaining things in simple words, never making him feel foolish for not knowing. "You really know what you're doing," said finally, breaking the silence. It wasn't a compliment he gave often, and he sounded almost surprised at his own words. She smiled, a little shyly. "I've been doing this for years. I love it. You get used to listening to the car, feeling its problems. It's like solving a puzzle." He nodded, watching her hands move over the engine again. There was something mesmerizing about the way she worked. She didn't just fix the car, she breathed life back into it. For the first time in a long while, he felt a strange sense of peace. It was almost as if the chaos of his world, money, meetings, endless responsibilities, had vanished for a moment, replaced by the simple act of someone caring for something. By midday, she had almost finished the repairs. The engine purred smoothly, the car seemed lighter, as if it could glide effortlessly down the road. She wiped her hands once more, looking at the man. "It's ready," she said simply. He stepped closer, leaning over the hood to peer inside. The car looked perfect, but more than that, he felt different, lightness he hadn't known in years. I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't need to," she replied, her voice calm and steady. Cars, like people, get tired if you push them too hard. He smiled, a real smile this time, one that touched his eyes. There was something in her words that struck a chord deep inside him. Maybe it was her sincerity or the simplicity of her life compared to his complicated one. Or maybe, he admitted to himself quietly, it was her heart. As he drove away, he couldn't help but look back. She stood there, leaning slightly against the garage, her hair tied back, a streak of grease on her cheek. Her eyes following the car as it disappeared down the road. He realized something he hadn't expected. He wanted to see her again, not just to fix another car, but to understand her, to know the world she lived in, so different from his own. For her part, she shook her head slightly, smiling to herself. She didn't know why, but something about him felt different from other rich people she had met. He wasn't arrogant, not really. Beneath the polished exterior, there was a hint of vulnerability, a loneliness she recognized, even without knowing him. And in her heart, she felt a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, this encounter was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. The day continued as usual for her. The regular customers coming in, cars needing fixes, conversations about simple life matters. But something had shifted. Even when she laughed and joked with the locals, her mind wandered to the man with the sleek black car. The one who had left more than just an engine in her garage. It left a spark, a question she didn't yet have the answer to. And far away in the city, he couldn't stop thinking about her either. The simple mechanic girl who had fixed his car and somehow, without even realizing it, it started fixing a part of his heart he thought was beyond repair. It was the kind of story no one in the town would have believed if they heard it later. A simple car repair that would turn into something neither of them could have imagined. But at that moment, neither of them knew the journey that was about to begin, one that would challenge their worlds, their beliefs, and ultimately their hearts. Little did they know, this was only the first chapter of a story that would change both of their lives forever. Days passed after the man had driven away in his sleek black car. Life for the mechanic girl went on as usual. Cars came in, engines groaned, and grease stained her hands. She loved the rhythm of her work, the satisfaction of seeing a car run smoothly again, and the trust her customers placed in her. Yet even amid the familiar chaos of her garage, she found herself thinking of him more than she expected. It wasn't just that he had been a customer with a fancy car. It was the way he had looked at her while she worked. It's not with judgment or superiority, but with curiosity and something softer. Almost like he was seeing a part of the world he had long forgotten existed. She shook her head and smiled to herself. People came and went every day. It wasn't wise to dwell on one, no matter how different he felt. Meanwhile, far away, he couldn't shake the memory of her either. The city's skyscrapers and endless meetings felt emptier than usual. He had been used to having control, being in charge of everything, but her presence reminded him of how little he really understood about life outside his world. The simplicity of her life, her dedication, and the genuine kindness she carried were unlike anything he had ever experienced. He realized that what he thought was just a simple car repair had left an imprint on his mind. A week later, fate seemed determined to intervene. He returned to the town for a short break, wanting to escape the constant pressures of his life. The streets felt quieter than the city, slower and calmer. He decided to take a walk, almost unconsciously drawn toward the garage he remembered. She was outside, wiping down the hood of an old truck, her hands stained with oil, a small smile on her face as she talked to the driver. She hadn't noticed him at first. The world of her garage always demanded her focus, but when she looked up, her eyes met his. Time seemed to pause for a moment. He smiled and she felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said, trying to sound casual, though her voice carried a hint of surprise. "I didn't expect to come back either," he replied, stepping closer. "But I wanted to see how things were going here." There was a pause, a quiet moment where neither of them spoke. The sounds of the town, the distant hum of cars, the chatter of people, and the clinking of tools seemed to fade into the background. For a brief second, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. "You still working on the same old cars?" he asked finally, trying to start a conversation. She laughed softly. Yes and no. Some things change, some stay the same. What about you? Still driving fancy cars and attending meetings? He chuckled, a sound that didn't come often. Yes, the meetings never end, but there's something different about this place. It feels real. She nodded, understanding what he meant without needing words. Her life was simple, yes, but it was full of meaning. Every car she fixed, every person she helped, gave her a sense of purpose she knew. He rarely experienced in his world of wealth and endless obligations. He stayed longer than he intended. They walked around the garage together, talking about cars, engines, and even small things about their lives. She told him about her struggles, how it wasn't always easy to run the garage alone, how she had learned everything by herself, and how she sometimes worried about the future. He listened, genuinely interested, and offered advice, not the kind of advice that came with judgment, but suggestions born from his experience. As the day moved on, he realized something he hadn't admitted even to himself before. He liked being around her, not just for the comfort she gave, but because she reminded him of a life he had forgotten to live. Her laughter was easy, her thoughts simple, yet profound, and her presence brought a calm he hadn't known he needed. For her part, she found herself opening up in a way she rarely did. Most people in her town treated her with respect, but kept a distance. They appreciated her skills, but rarely cared about the person behind them. With him, it was different. She didn't have to hide her fears, her doubts, or even her dreams. And as strange as it seemed, she felt a connection forming, one that went beyond a mechanic and her customer. Days turned into weeks. He kept finding reasons to return. Sometimes it was a small problem with a car, other times just a reason to see her. Each visit, their conversations grew longer, their laughs louder, and their understanding deeper. The townspeople began to notice, whispering quietly among themselves about the unusual friendship forming between the poor mechanic girl and the wealthy man. But neither of them cared about what others thought. They had discovered a world where appearances didn't matter, where wealth and status were irrelevant, and where genuine connection was the only currency that counted. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, he helped her lift a heavy engine part into the garage. They both laughed at the struggle, muscles straining, faces red from effort. "You make this look so easy," he said, finally letting go, wiping sweat from his forehead. She laughed, shaking her head. "Years of practice, and a little stubbornness." He smiled at her, noticing the determination in her eyes. It wasn't just about cars. It was about life. She faced challenges head-on, never giving up, and somehow in her world, he felt inspired. That evening, as he drove back to the city, he thought about her constantly. Her smile, her words, the way she moved with such confidence and grace. For the first time in a long time, he questioned his life choices. He had wealth, power, and influence, yet none of it brought the simple joy he felt when he was with her. He realized that his heart, long buried under responsibilities and ambitions, was awakening in a way he hadn't expected. Meanwhile, she watched the road he had taken, a small smile on her lips. She didn't fully understand the feelings rising inside her, but she knew one thing: he was different from anyone she had ever met. And deep down, she felt a quiet hope that this chance encounter wasn't just a fleeting moment, but the beginning of something meaningful. Little did they know, their connection was only the first step. Challenges were coming worlds apart in wealth, experiences, and expectations, but something stronger than all of that had begun to grow, and neither of them could deny it any longer. The car repair had been simple, but the story it began was anything but ordinary. Weeks turned into months, and the simple mechanic girl and the wealthy man grew closer without realizing it. Their encounters, at first accidental or casual, became moments they both eagerly anticipated. She no longer felt surprised when he appeared in her town, and he found excuses to extend his stays. Their conversations moved beyond cars and engines, touching on hopes, dreams, and fears they rarely shared with anyone else. For her, each visit brought excitement mixed with nervousness. She was aware of the differences between their lives, the wealth, the comfort, the opportunities he had, compared to her small garage and humble living. Yet, with him, those differences seemed to fade. He treated her as an equal, never condescending, never questioning her choices, and always listening with genuine interest. That respect made her heart soften in ways she had not expected. He too found himself changing. The city's endless hustle no longer held the same appeal. Meetings, contracts, and formal dinners felt empty compared to the simple joy of sitting in her garage. Watching her work, listening to her laugh, he admired the way she approached life with practicality and honesty. Yet she was kind and generous, often helping others even when she had little to give. Her courage and warmth made him reflect on his own actions and the people he had surrounded himself with. He realized that he had spent so much time chasing wealth that he had forgotten the value of human connection. One afternoon, as the sun shone brightly over the town, he arrived with a small box in hand. She looked up, wiping her hands on a rag, and smiled, expecting a routine conversation about a car repair. But instead, he handed her the box with a quiet, almost shy smile. "It's nothing important," he said, trying to downplay it, though the careful way he held it suggested otherwise. "Just something I thought you might like." She opened it and found a small, handcrafted notebook inside. Its cover was plain, but soft to the touch, and the pages inside were blank. She looked up at him in surprise. "It's for your ideas," he said. "Thoughts, sketches, plans, anything. You seem like someone who always has more in her mind than she shares." Her eyes softened. Few people had ever noticed her creativity, her dreams beyond the garage. Most only saw the mechanic, not the person who imagined a life filled with possibilities. She touched the notebook gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's thoughtful." He smiled, a little embarrassed at the depth of emotion in her voice. "I just wanted you to know that I noticed the things about you that others might miss."
That moment,
Simple as it was, lingered in both their hearts. She felt appreciated, seen for more than her work or her situation. And he felt a quiet pride, a happiness, in giving something meaningful rather than luxurious. The gap between their worlds felt slightly smaller, bridged by understanding and care. Days after that, their bond deepened. He began to learn more about her daily life, how she woke up before dawn to prepare for the day, how she meticulously cleaned her tools and space, how she found joy in little victories, like a car starting perfectly after hours of work. She, in turn, learned about his responsibilities and pressures, though he never exaggerated them. He was honest about his challenges, the loneliness that came with wealth, and the sense of expectation that seemed impossible to escape. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the town in shades of orange and pink, they found themselves sitting on a small bench near the garage, sharing a quiet moment. She leaned back, looking at him, and noticed something she hadn't before: the vulnerability in his eyes. "You seem tired," she said gently. "Not just physically, but everything else, too." He sighed, a deep sound that carried the weight of his life. "I am. I have so much, yet it never feels enough. I've built everything around me, but sometimes I wonder if I've built it for the right reasons." Listened, feeling a pang of empathy. She didn't tee off her cliches or easy advice. She simply nodded. "I think sometimes we forget what really matters. Things we can't buy or control." Her words struck him profoundly. He realized that in her simplicity, she had clarity he had long lost. And in that moment, he felt a shift in his heart. He wanted her to be part of his life, not just as someone he visited, but as someone he could trust, confide in, and care for deeply. Their connection grew in small ways too. He began helping her with the garage in practical ways, not because she needed it, but because he wanted to be involved in her world. Together, they lifted engines, sorted tools, and even fixed a few old cars that had been abandoned. Laughter and playful teasing became common, replacing the awkward formality that had existed in their first meetings. One rainy afternoon, they were under the garage's small roof, working on a particularly stubborn engine that refused to start. Water dripped from the edges, soaking their hair and clothes, but neither minded. They worked side by side, occasionally glancing at each other with smiles that needed no words. When the engine finally roared to life, they cheered together, high-fived, and laughed until their sides ached. It was during moments like these that he realized Love wasn't grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was shared laughter, trust, and simple acts of care. She, too, began to notice the change in herself. Her heart, once guarded, began to open to the possibility that someone from a world so different from hers could see her, understand her, and value her for who she truly was. Yet, as their bond strengthened, challenges loomed. The differences between their worlds could not be ignored forever. Her life was tied to the small town and the garage she had built with her own hands. His life was full of responsibilities, obligations, and expectations that came with wealth. Neither of them knew how to reconcile these two realities without risking what had grown between them. Despite the uncertainty, neither of them pulled away. Instead, they embraced the moments they had, letting trust and affection grow naturally. They shared meals, stories of childhood dreams, and quiet walks in the evening. Each interaction added layers to their connection, making it clear that what started as a simple encounter over a car repair had evolved into something much deeper. He began thinking of ways to bridge the gap between their worlds. Not by changing her, but by finding ways to connect their lives meaningfully. She, on her part, began to imagine a life where their differences didn't matter, where mutual respect and love could guide their choices. One evening, as the stars appeared above, they sat outside the garage, talking softly about life, dreams, and fears. She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth and steadiness he offered. He held her hand, realizing that moments like this were more valuable than any success or luxury he had ever known. Neither spoke of the future, yet both felt a quiet certainty that they were no longer alone. A bond had formed, one built on trust, understanding, and genuine affection. It was fragile yet strong, simple yet profound, and it was only growing stronger with each passing day. The journey was far from over. Challenges awaited, and the realities of their different lives could not be ignored. But for now, in these moments of shared laughter, trust, and closeness, they discovered a truth they could not deny. Love often begins in the simplest ways, and sometimes a single encounter can change the course of two lives forever. The bond between the mechanic girl and the wealthy man had grown stronger over time. But life, as it often does, began to test them. Their worlds were very different, and while their connection was deep and genuine, outside pressures started creeping in. It began subtly, small misunderstandings and hesitations that neither of them could fully explain at first. One afternoon, as she worked under the hood of an old sedan, he arrived looking more serious than usual. His smile was polite but forced, and she noticed the tension in his posture. She wiped her hands and approached him, concern evident in her eyes. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then shook his head slightly. "It's complicated. Work. Obligations. People don't always understand why I'm here, why I spend time in a place like this." She nodded slowly, understanding more than he realized. The life he led was full of expectations. Being with her, someone outside of his world, meant he had to navigate opinions, judgments, and responsibilities that she would never face. "We'll figure it out," she said quietly. "We always find a way, don't we?" He smiled faintly, touched by her calm confidence. Yet, as he left that day, he felt the weight of reality pressing down on him. Being with her was no longer a simple matter of shared moments. It involved choices that could change both their lives. Meanwhile, she faced her own doubts. She loved the time they spent together, the way he treated her with respect and kindness, but she worried about the future. Would their differences, the distance between their worlds, eventually push them apart? Could someone like him truly stay in a life so ordinary and grounded? These thoughts lingered in her mind even as she focused on her work. Making repairs and helping her customers, the following week brought another challenge. A well-known car company announced plans to open a large service center in the town, threatening the small garages that had survived on local trust and loyalty. She watched with unease as trucks, signs, and advertisements appeared, signaling the arrival of big competition. She knew her skills were unmatched, but she also understood that many customers would be tempted by convenience and shiny facilities. He noticed her concern immediately. "You've built this place with your own hands," he said one evening, leaning against the garage wall. "It's not just a business. It's part of who you are. Don't let anyone take that away." She smiled, grateful for his support, but uncertainty still gnawed at her. "I know, but what if people leave? What if everything I've worked for starts to crumble?" He reached out, taking her hand gently. "Then we face it together. You don't have to do this alone." His words comforted her, but challenges were only growing more complex. His world began to demand more of his attention: meetings, travel, and responsibilities he could not ignore. He struggled to balance his life with the time he wanted to spend in her town, and each visit became a careful negotiation, a test of whether their bond could survive the pressure surrounding them. One rainy evening, she closed the garage after a long day. He arrived unexpectedly, drenched but smiling. "I couldn't stay away," he said simply. "I know things are hard, but I wanted to see you." She shook her head, half frustrated, half amused. "You're impossible sometimes. You have responsibilities, and yet you keep coming back here like it's nothing." He smiled, his eyes soft. "Some things are worth the effort, and you're worth it." Her heart fluttered at his words, but reality pressed in. She knew the path ahead was not easy. Differences in lifestyle, expectations from his world, and the arrival of corporate competition in her town made everything uncertain. And yet, for the first time, she felt someone standing beside her who genuinely cared not just about her work, but about her as a person. As the weeks passed, they continued to navigate their growing connection while facing these obstacles. He helped with the garage in ways that went beyond repairs, offering advice on efficiency, organization, and attracting more customers. She welcomed his support but insisted on keeping her independence, determined to maintain her identity and the life she had built with her own hands. Their moments together became even more precious. They shared meals in small cafes, walked along quiet streets in the evening, and spent hours talking about dreams they rarely shared with anyone else. She learned about his childhood, the pressures of wealth and expectation, and the loneliness that often accompanied his life. He learned about her struggles, her pride in her work, and her unwavering determination to live life on her own terms. One day, a group of people from his world arrived unexpectedly, intending to convince him to return to the city permanently. They spoke of deals, investments, and responsibilities that required his immediate attention. She watched quietly, feeling the tension rise. Knowing that their presence threatened the fragile balance they had created, he handled the situation with care, explaining his decisions, but it became clear that he could not escape his world indefinitely. She felt a pang of fear, wondering if the distance, the differences, and the pressures would force them apart. That evening, they sat together on the garage steps, the quiet hum of the town around them. "I don't want to lose this," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. He took her hands in his, looking into her eyes. "Neither do I. We'll find a way. It won't be easy, but I believe we can make it work." She nodded, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. The road ahead was challenging, filled with obstacles neither of them could fully predict. But in that moment, their commitment to each other strengthened. They knew that love, trust, and understanding could help them face anything even worlds apart. Even external pressures, even the uncertainties of life. The next few weeks tested their resolve further. Corporate competition began drawing away customers. The pressure on him from his world intensified, and rumors in the town added stress to her already busy life. Yet, through it all, they found strength in each other. Every shared laugh, every moment of care, every conversation that revealed hidden parts of their hearts reinforced the bond they had formed. One evening, as the sun set in a burst of golden light, they stood together outside the garage, looking at the quiet town that had become their shared space. "It's not perfect," he said, his voice low, "but it's ours." She smiled, leaning slightly into him. "And sometimes, that's enough." Despite the obstacles, they discovered a truth that became the foundation of their relationship. Love was not just about ease and comfort. It was about facing challenges together, supporting each other through difficulties, and finding joy in the moments that mattered most as the night settled over the town. They walked back into the garage, hands intertwined, ready to face whatever came next. Their journey was far from over, but their connection had deepened in ways neither could have imagined. What started as a simple car repair had grown into a relationship built on trust, understanding, and shared courage, a bond strong enough to weather the storms ahead. The months that followed tested them in ways they had never imagined. The mechanic girl and the wealthy man had grown closer than ever, yet life continued to throw obstacles their way. Corporate competition in her town expanded, making it difficult for small garages to survive. At the same time, his world demanded his attention: business trips, meetings, and endless obligations that he could not ignore. Despite the challenges, they refused to let go. Each obstacle became an opportunity to grow closer, to understand each other better, and to discover strengths they didn't know they had. They learned that love was not only about joy and laughter, but also about patience, sacrifice, and unwavering trust. One rainy morning, the mechanic girl was in her garage, working on a rusty old truck that seemed beyond repair. She had her sleeves rolled up, hands deep in the engine, when he arrived carrying a small umbrella. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stood in the doorway, watching her work. She looked up and smiled, wiping her hands on a rag. "I didn't expect to see you here in this weather." "I couldn't stay away," he said simply. "I wanted to help." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Help? You're going to get dirty," he laughed, stepping closer and rolling up his sleeves. "I don't mind. Besides, teamwork makes everything easier, doesn't it?" Together, they worked on the truck, laughing at their mistakes and celebrating small victories. With every nut tightened and every part fixed, they felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the mechanical. They were building something stronger, something more lasting, their life together. Later that afternoon, as the rain cleared and sunlight filtered through the clouds, he led her to a small spot near the garage. He had set up a simple picnic, with sandwiches, fruit, and a small blanket. She looked at him, surprised. "Why are we doing this?" she asked, laughing softly. "Because sometimes we need to pause," he replied, "to appreciate what we have, to remember why we're fighting for it." She smiled, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. They sat together, sharing food and stories, talking about their dreams and fears. The distance between their worlds felt smaller in moments like these, replaced by a shared understanding that neither wealth nor status mattered when hearts were aligned. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened further. He became a familiar figure in her town, not as a wealthy outsider, but as someone who genuinely cared for the people and places around him. He helped where he could, not to impress, but to contribute meaningfully. She, in turn, shared her world with him, her daily routines, her struggles, her joys, and even her quiet moments of doubt. The town began to notice the bond they shared. Locals admired their dedication to each other and the way they complemented one another. He respected her independence and her work ethic, and she embraced his kindness and patience. Together, they faced the challenges brought by the new corporate competition, finding creative ways to attract customers, improve services, and maintain the heart of her small garage. One evening, after a particularly long day, they sat together on the garage steps, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, reflecting the warmth they felt in their hearts. "I never imagined my life would change like this," he said quietly. "I thought I knew what I wanted, what I needed, but you've shown me a world I didn't even know existed." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you've shown me that love isn't just about what's easy or comfortable. It's about trust, effort, and choosing each other every day." He turned to her, holding her hands gently. "I want to choose you every day, no matter what comes. I know life isn't simple, and I know there will be challenges, but I want us to face them together." Her heart swelled with emotion. "I choose you too," she whispered, "and I'm ready to face anything with you by my side." In that moment, they realized that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was built in the quiet hours in shared laughter, in teamwork, and in the unwavering support they gave each other. It was in the simple things, repairing a car, sharing a meal, walking under the stars, that they found the truest form of connection. As time passed, their relationship became an inspiration for those around them. The garage, once a small, humble place, grew stronger. People came not just for repairs, but to see the partnership, respect, and love that filled the space. The mechanic girl and the wealthy man had created something Lestanja life together, built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. One sunny morning, he arrived with a small envelope in his hand. She noticed the nervousness in his posture, a rarity for someone usually so composed. "What's this?" she asked, curious. He smiled softly. "Open it." Inside was a simple card with a few words written in careful handwriting. "Life is better together. Will you marry me?" Her eyes widened, and tears filled her eyes. She looked at him, overwhelmed with joy and disbelief. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, I will." He slipped a simple, elegant ring onto her finger, and they embraced, feeling a happiness that neither wealth nor hardship could diminish. The challenges they had faced, the differences in their worlds, the pressures of life, and the uncertainties of the future seemed smaller now. Overcome by the strength of their love, their life together was not perfect, but it was real. They continued to work in the garage, helping customers, fixing cars, and sharing moments of laughter and care. He balanced his responsibilities with his life in the town, always returning to her side. She continued to run the garage with her dedication and skill. Now, with his unwavering support, years later, as they walked through the streets of the town, hand in hand, people would smile and nod. Knowing the story of the mechanic girl and the wealthy man who had fallen in love through a simple act of kindness, their love story had begun with a car repair, grown through trust and understanding, and matured into a lifelong partnership built on respect, effort, and shared dreams. In the quiet moments, when the garage was empty and the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, they would sit together, remembering the day they first met, the car that brought them together, and the journey that had changed both of their lives forever. They had discovered that love was not about the worlds they came from, but about the hearts they shared, and in that, they found a happiness that would last a lifetime. The story that began with a simple car repair had transformed into a life filled with laughter, challenges overcome, and love that neither time nor circumstance could break. And as they faced each day together, they knew one truth above all: the simplest acts, when filled with kindness and care, could create a love story no one could ever forget. Life had changed for the mechanic girl and the wealthy man, but not in the ways most people would expect. Their love, which had begun with a simple car repair, now faced the realities of building a life together. The town that had watched them grow closer over months now saw them as a couple deeply committed to one another, and they had become a source of inspiration for the community. The garage, once small and modest, had transformed slowly but carefully. Together, they expanded its capacity while keeping the charm that had made it special. They added a few extra bays for cars, invested in new tools, and trained a small team of apprentices. Yet the mechanic girl insisted that the heart of the garage remain the same: honest work, personal attention to every car, and respect for every customer. He supported her vision fully, contributing his resources, but never in a way that compromised her independence. Their days were busy, full of laughter, effort, and shared responsibility. He would arrive early to help with the heavy work, or with tasks that required additional hands. She would guide him patiently, showing that experience and skill were as important as enthusiasm. They learned from one another constantly. He learned the patience and meticulousness required in her work, and she learned how to manage business challenges that extended beyond the garage. Yet, life wasn't without challenges. Some days, the pressures of his world crept into their lives. Invitations to high-profile events, urgent business meetings, and demands from partners sometimes took him away from the town he loved and the life he had chosen with her. At times, she felt a pang of loneliness or worry, unsure if he was truly present, even when physically there. But each challenge was met with open communication, honesty, and the commitment to make their bond stronger. One evening, after a long day, they sat together on the small porch outside the garage, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air smelled faintly of gasoline mixed with flowers from nearby gardens. The mechanic girl rested her head on his shoulder, sighing with contentment. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly, meaning the life he had before his wealth, his freedom from limitations, his world filled with luxury and influence. He thought for a moment, watching the golden light. "Sometimes, but I don't miss it in the way you think. I've discovered a life here that I never knew I wanted until I met you. This, us. It's real. It's worth every sacrifice." She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "It's not always easy," she said. "Sometimes I worry about the future, about everything changing." He held her hands firmly. "We'll face it together. No matter what comes, we'll make it through. Because it's not just about us, it's about what we've built together, what we've grown into." The months turned into years, and their love continued to deepen. They faced unexpected challenges together, a major storm that damaged part of the garage, a sudden illness in a family member, and financial obstacles that tested their resourcefulness, but every trial strengthened their bond. They discovered that love wasn't only about joy and laughter, it was about resilience, teamwork, the courage to face life's uncertainties hand in hand. In their daily life, small moments became treasures. Morning coffees shared quietly in the garage office, the smell of oil and fresh bread from a nearby bakery mingling in the air. Afternoon walks to check on local suppliers, exchanging smiles and jokes with neighbors who had come to respect and admire their partnership. Evenings spent under the stars, talking about dreams for the future, or sometimes simply sitting in silence, enjoying the peace of being together. One particularly busy day, a young boy brought his broken bicycle to the garage. His parents had little money, and the bike was their only means for him to get to school. The mechanic girl and the wealthy man worked together to repair it, using skills and creativity, and refused to charge the family. When the boy rode away smiling, the mechanic girl looked at him and said, "Moments like this is why we do what we do." He nodded, squeezing her hand. "It's about more than cars. It's about helping people, showing care. That's what makes life meaningful." They also began mentoring young apprentices, passing on skills, patience, and lessons about integrity. Many of the kids came from challenging backgrounds. They found inspiration in the couple's story, a tale of resilience, love, and the triumph of genuine effort over circumstance. The mechanic girl would often remind them, "It's not about how much you have, but how much you care," and he would add, "and how you choose to use what you have to help others." In quieter, private moments, their love flourished. They shared inside jokes, memories of their early days, and reflections on how far they had come. They celebrated small victories together, from fixing an old engine that had been abandoned for years to seeing a neighbor succeed in a new business. Every success, big or small, became a shared joy, further strengthening the bond that had begun with something as simple as a car repair. Years later, they decided to expand their life further. They built a small home next to the garage, a modest but comfortable place that reflected both of their personalities. The walls were filled with mementos of their journey, photographs, handwritten notes, sketches from the notebook he had given her long ago, and little trophies from the garage. Every corner told a story of persistence, love, shared dreams. The community continued to support them, not only because of their work, but because of the love and respect they showed to everyone around them. Locals would often stop by for advice, to learn skills, or simply to share stories. Their relationship had become a beacon, showing that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to lasting love and meaningful life. Even with the challenges of aging, the responsibilities of running the garage, and the ever-changing world around them, they remained committed to each other. They learned to adapt, to compromise, and to celebrate life's simple pleasures. Their bond, forged in honesty and shared experience, remained unshaken by time or circumstance. In the quiet moments, when the sun set over the town and the garage stood still, They would sit side by side, hands intertwined, reflecting on their journey. From the first encounter at Kara, in need of repair, to building a life filled with trust, laughter, and shared purpose, they had discovered the most important truth. Love was not just a feeling, but a choice made every day. And so the mechanic girl and the wealthy man lived their lives together, hand in hand, hearts aligned, and spirits intertwined. Their story, which began with a single act of kindness, had grown into a lifelong adventure. They had faced challenges, bridged worlds, and built a life full of love, purpose, and meaning. Their legacy was not wealth or possessions, but the enduring example of what true love, respect, and shared effort could create, even as new generations passed through the garage, learning, laughing, and growing. The story of the mechanic girl who fixed a car and a man who had found his heart remained a legend in the town. It was a tale of hope, perseverance, and love that reminded everyone that sometimes the simplest moments in life could lead to the most extraordinary journeys. And as they watched the sun rise over the town each morning, ready to face whatever the day would bring, they knew one truth above all. Their love was more than a story, it was a life. Built together, strong, lasting, and full of meaning.